ask everyone to please come into the chapel and have a seat. We're about getting ready just to begin the service for Mr. David Jordan Gossage.
Yes, we have.
Pretty fun down there.
Let's just see how it
Did you consider when you were visiting? That's summer. Yeah, I take that. Wherever you're most comfortable, sit closer to the podium.
This is my stuff. I can sit here. I don't think so.
I just put something on.
Yeah. Ellen, you want to sit right front?
Yeah, he said.
No.
Howard with Howard?
Sorry. Oh my God.
So.
I knew I was going to do that.
Do what I'm saying, right? Good.
Just some mix, and there's a water bottle there.
Howard. Give it to you if they want. We have extra cream. Yeah, if you need, if they would like to. Or not.
He's asking you to come.
Do you want to sit?
Go up there. Go behind, say your seat.
Thank you. Which is symbolic of that's all that I did. Tearing especially from the breath. Oh no, this is my children are alive. Everyone else is alive. Sure. So Renee, it's just the but you tear the ribbon from the bottom. I'll say the words and you can write like every Diana, my grandma, and my brother. I don't know if they have sometimes the side works too.
That's it. Outside.
No thanks.
Just a gentle reminder, folks, if you have a cell phone with you this morning, just please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. That would be appreciated. And just a few brief announcements before we begin. Following the interment today, Shiva will be observed at the Gossage residence in Oak Brook. The address is 408 Ascot Lane, following the interment, and that address is also listed in the service folder that you received. The interment will follow immediately from the chapel service here today. And these services will be officiated by Rabbi Amanda Green from Chicago Sinai Congregation.
Death has taken our beloved David Jordan Gossage. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God. Be with them. For David's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that was shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind that brought joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. It tells of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. I invite you to open your pamphlet and turn to the words of the 23rd Psalm, a psalm that has been used throughout the generations to be words of comfort and familiarity to those who are walking through the valley of the shadow of death. We'll join together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. Life is a journey, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding. From fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. All of us here today remember and grieve for the loss of David. We especially turn today to his beloved Rosa, to his children Brenda and Peter, to Sarah and Leah and Jason, and to his grandchildren, to Riley and Kaylin and Avraham and Shira and Meir, and Leah and Rena and Warren and Hannah, and of course to his siblings Howard and Ellen and Faith and Richard. and to his many beloved nieces and cousins and friends, and we offer you as much comfort and support as we can. David Jordan Gossage was born in Chicago on November 9th, 1944. The Gossage family moved shortly after he was born to a small town in southern Illinois, where the family owned a scrap metal business. A few years later, the family bought a chicken farm and moved to a home on that lot. Howard, David's older brother by 18 months, and David loved growing up on this lot. They would play in the large hallways of the chicken farm with the paper and the rags, making forts and even reading National Geographic. Together, they would make the forts and they would read the magazine and play around the farm. They loved going to work with their parents, especially in the summer, when they learned how to weigh and all about the different metals, and they loved to visit with the customers too. And sometimes they would get in trouble, like the time they played doctor, and Howard found a bottle of medicine on the side of the house and poured it into his brother David's eyes. Howard felt really bad about that one. It was only meant to be fun and games. In this small town, they were one of the only Jewish families. The short walk that the brothers took to school proved difficult each day, as it was a fight, and the Gossage brothers were both pretty passive. It wasn't actually until years later that they realized how difficult it would have been to grow up in that town. Eventually, the family moved back to Chicago, where David attended Mather High School before he chose to go into the Army, where he served for 3 years and 9 months in Colorado, Kansas, and Germany. While in the Army, he would send letters to Howard and Ellen with the initials BS all over random words. At the end of the letter, David clarified what BS stood for: bad spelling. When he returned from the Army, David went out to California for a brief time before Howard convinced him to come back to work together in Chicago. It was here in Chicago, on a visit to David's aunt and uncle's home, that David noticed this beautiful woman next door with her nose in a book. At first, Rosa appeared less than interested, but David somehow convinced her to go to Navy Pier, where he won a very expensive stuffed animal for her. David was head over heels in love with Rosa, and in 1970, the two were married. David and Rosa moved to Belleville, where he started his business. Brenda, Sarah, and Leah entered the world there. They looked up to their dad and always wanted to be around him. He was a fun dad, silly, and he loved to debate. Whatever side you wanted, he would take the opposite and then say, switch. At this time, I'm going to invite two of his daughters, Brenda and Leah, to come up and share some words about David.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we really appreciate the comfort and support of your presence and being here and honoring and remembering our father. We just wanted to say a few words about our dad. So, despite all the challenges life can throw at you, my sisters and I were born with great luck to have David Jordan Gossage as our father. And there aren't enough words to express what he means to me and what I know he means to my sisters. He never believed learning life's lessons should be done alone. He believed in us and knew we could learn from our mistakes without enduring pain, and he did whatever he could to minimize any suffering. And I'm proud to say that wasn't just the kind of father he was, that was the kind of man he was. He couldn't stand to see people suffering, whether it was people he knew, his family, or even watching the news. If it was people suffering, he would turn the channel. And if he could help, he did. And sometimes at his own expense by carrying the burden of others. He believed everyone had a right to work and deserved a second chance. And sometimes he gave thirds and many more chances, which we as his family would warn him not to do, but it was his way. He believed in people's ability to rise. He frequently hired people who had hard lives, who had made mistakes maybe, or maybe they just needed a chance at a new beginning. We feel he saw himself in those people, and that speaks to his ability to connect with people. In the days since he's passed, people have told us beautiful stories of how my dad was like a dad to them, doing things he did for me and for my sisters, but doing it for others as well. Like maybe he helped them buy their first car, we've heard that story, or helped them negotiate the purchase of their first home. A few of his employees have shared that my dad was like family to them, having worked for him most of their adult lives. He taught them about his business and encouraged them to be entrepreneurs themselves, believing that with hard work, they could achieve whatever they set their minds to. No man is perfect, but to me, my dad was a superhero. He didn't leap tall buildings in a single bound or fly through the air. His superpower was in the way he connected with people. He could light up a room with his presence and fill the room with his personality. He made those around him feel special because to him they were. My kids know what I'm talking about because we've talked about that superpower. What an incredible gift to be able to make others smile and feel loved. So if you're sitting there thinking of how you could honor my father's life, do that. Make someone smile. Use a joke he would have told, or tell a funny story about him. He wouldn't have wanted to see us here like this, to see us hurting. It would have upset him to see us so upset. And we are sad, but it's because of how much we loved him and how he brought joy and silliness. And we already long for what we miss. He loved life and he loved his family deeply. He laughed with us. He listened to us as we shared our lives with him. He challenged us in heated debates and celebrated with us the precious moments in our lives. We will continue to carry him with us by doing these things with the same love of life that he had. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those powerful words about your dad. A few other stories about David and his relationship with others. His daughters, their interests were not like the other girls growing up. They learned about car parts and trucks, and they even learned to drive forklifts. Because as long as they could be with their dad, they were happy. As you heard, they learned so much from their father. How he would give second and sometimes third chances. How he was willing to give anyone a job as long as they worked hard. How he considered everyone he knew a friend. His employees were not employees, they were family. Even at the barber shop or the bank, they were always happy when David walked in. He didn't have transactional relationships. He valued each and every individual. Family was everything. Bringing joy to others was what made him smile most. David loved kids, whether they were his own or even admiring others, and especially when his grandchildren were born. David loved being grandpa. He wanted to make them smile with his silliness and jokes and games. The last few years were challenging, and the love of his family was critical, especially when David moved in with Brenda and her family for a few months post-surgery. The grandchildren would help Grandpa get a glass of water or the Kleenex box, but eventually Grandpa was taking advantage. Brenda told her children that they needed to encourage Grandpa to get up on his own. And typical Grandpa, whose philosophy was, rules are meant to be broken, would pay the grandchildren to continue with the tasks. David marched to the beat of his own drum. Whether you called him on the phone to check in every day, or 4 times a day, or spoke with him every Saturday, David loved each of you unconditionally. It was his greatest gift. Invite those of you who are able to rise for our Al Malei Rachamim prayer. Al Malei Rachamim, Shochin Bamromim, Hamtze Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utahorim Kazohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Dovid, Shehalach Le'olamo, Ba'al Harachamim Yasti Rehu Beseter Kanafav Le'olamim, Bitzror HaChaim, Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar, Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold David close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of eternal. May he find a home with you, and may David Jordan Gossage rest in peace. Together we say,